Meet Julian West, a 38-year-old tech mogul who built his empire from scratch. With a net worth in the billions, Julian had everything: sprawling mansions, luxury cars, and the world's finest experiences at his fingertips. But despite his wealth, there was one thing missing: a child. Julian's life felt empty, and his search for the right partner had ended in heartbreak after heartbreak. One day, while driving through the city, he spotted a homeless woman huddled under a bridge, clutching a tattered blanket. For reasons he couldn't explain, something about her struck him. Could she, of all people, be the answer to his dilemma? Crazy as it sounded, an idea took root in Julian's mind, an unconventional plan that would shock anyone who knew him. What would drive a man like Julian to turn to a stranger for something so deeply personal? The homeless woman was Sophia, a 29-year-old with a past riddled with tragedy. Once a promising art student, Sophia's life spiraled after losing her family in a devastating accident. Grieving and without support, she eventually found herself on the streets. Sophia sat beneath the overpass, clutching her thin blanket as the cool wind cut through the city. Her face was weathered, her eyes tired, but they still held a quiet determination. As Julian stepped out of his sleek black car and approached her, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement, she looked up with guarded suspicion. She was used to people avoiding her gaze, or worse, tossing her pitying looks before hurrying away. But this man stopped in front of her, his expression calm but intense. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady yet carrying a hint of hesitation. "I'd like to talk to you about something." Sophia straightened, pulling her blanket closer. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone sharp, almost offensive. Julian could see the mistrust in her eyes, the walls she'd built to protect herself from the world. But he pressed on, explaining his desire to have a child and his unconventional offer. "I'll give you $200,000 if you'll carry my baby," he said, watching her reaction closely. Sophia blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. Her first instinct was disbelief. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her voice trembling with both anger and confusion. Julian knelt down, bringing himself to her level. "It's not a joke," he said softly. "I know this sounds insane, but I believe you're stronger than you realize. I see something in you, something resilient, and I need someone like that." Sophia's heart raced. She felt vulnerable and exposed under his gaze, but at the same time, there was something sincere about him. She wanted to dismiss him outright, to tell him to leave her alone, but a part of her was curious. Could this be real? Could this man, a stranger, truly be offering her a lifeline after years of hardship? For Julian, the moment was equally heavy. He felt the weight of what he was asking, but he also felt a strange connection to this woman, a connection he couldn't explain. Would you have trusted Julian's intentions in this moment, or walked away from what seemed too good to be true? After hours of hesitation, Sophia agreed. Julian's offer was life-changing, money that could pull her out of homelessness and help her rebuild her life. But the arrangement wasn't simple. There were contracts to sign, medical exams, and months of preparation. Julian promised to set her up in a small apartment, ensuring she had proper nutrition and health care throughout the pregnancy. At first, Sophia was overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her life. Going from scrounging for food to having a personal chef felt surreal. Meanwhile, Julian too found himself in unfamiliar territory. He visited Sophia regularly, bringing books on parenting and listening to her stories. Their relationship was transactional, yet an unexpected bond began to form. Could this connection between two unlikely people lead to something neither of them had anticipated? The arrangement between Julian and Sophia was anything but simple. At first, the dynamic was strained, filled with an awkward push and pull as they both tried to navigate their vastly different worlds. Julian, used to controlling every aspect of his life, found himself challenged by Sophia's fiery independence and her refusal to blindly follow his lead. For Sophia, the sudden leap from a life of struggle to being cared for in Julian's opulent home felt both surreal and suffocating. She struggled to accept the idea that she was part of his plan. Not for love, not for companionship, but as a means to an end. Every interaction between them seemed to carry unspoken weight. Julian was trying to appear composed, but deep down, he wrestled with guilt. Was it wrong to ask this of her? Had he underestimated the emotional toll it would take on them both? For a man who had built his fortune by being decisive, he now felt unsure of himself in her presence. Sophia, on the other hand, was torn between gratitude and resentment. She couldn't deny the relief of having warm meals, a safe place to sleep, and regular medical care for the pregnancy. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that she was being treated as a commodity. She would push back during their conversations, refusing to be patronized or pitied, and Julian, though caught off guard by her defiance, found himself respecting her strength more than he expected. Despite the tension, small moments of understanding began to emerge. Once, when Sophia was overcome by morning sickness, Julian sat by her side, holding a glass of water and awkwardly patting her back. "You don't have to stay," she muttered, her pride still intact despite her vulnerability. "I want to," he replied simply, his voice betraying a softness she hadn't heard before. As the pregnancy progressed, Julian and Sophia's dynamic shifted. Julian began to confide in her about his struggles with loneliness and his strained relationship with his late father, who had always valued money over family. Sophia, in turn, shared her dreams of opening an art studio, a dream she'd buried under years of survival. Despite coming from different worlds, their conversations became a source of comfort for both. But not everyone in Julian's life approved. His business partners called the arrangement reckless and questioned his judgment. Even his lawyer, who had drafted the airtight contract, warned him to be cautious. "This could blow up in your face," he said. But Julian didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt like he was building something real. Have you ever formed an unexpected connection with someone who completely changed your perspective? By the time Sophia entered her third trimester, Julian was more invested than ever. He attended every doctor's appointment, even rearranging his business meetings to make time for her. "You're going to be a great dad," Sophia told him one day after a checkup. Julian smiled but looked away. "I hope so," he said quietly. It was the first time Sophia sensed his fear. Beneath his confident exterior, Julian carried doubts about whether he was truly capable of being a good father. Meanwhile, Sophia was grappling with her own emotions. Feeling the baby kick brought an unexpected attachment she hadn't anticipated. Though she knew the arrangement was clear, she would hand the baby over after birth. She couldn't help but wonder what it would feel like to let go. Could she follow through with the deal? The day finally arrived, a crisp autumn morning when Sophia went into labor. Julian was by her side through every moment, gripping her hand as she fought through the pain. When the baby's cries filled the room, an overwhelming wave of emotion washed over them both. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, handing the baby to Sophia for a brief moment before Julian held him for the first time. Tears streamed down Julian's face as he whispered, "You're perfect." But the moment was bittersweet for Sophia. She had brought this life into the world, but now she would have to say goodbye. Have you ever faced a moment where your heart told you one thing, but your circumstances demanded another? Sophia kept her promise, her hands trembling as she signed the final paperwork, relinquishing her parental rights. The weight of that decision lingered in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Julian, now officially the sole guardian of his newborn son, thought he was ready to handle everything on his own. But in the days that followed, reality hit him harder than he could have imagined. Sleepless nights, endless cries, and the overwhelming sense of responsibility began to take their toll. For the first time in his meticulously controlled life, Julian felt truly lost. One night, in sheer desperation, he picked up the phone and called Sophia. "He won't stop crying. I've tried everything. What do I do?" His voice was uncharacteristically shaky, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. Sophia hesitated, the ache in her chest sharp as she pictured her baby in someone else's arms. But despite her heartbreak, she couldn't turn him away. Try holding him against your chest. Sing to him, even if you think you're terrible at it, she said softly, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. What began as a single phone call quickly became a nightly routine. Julian would call, seeking advice on feeding schedules, soothing techniques, and even how to interpret his son's tiny expressions. Each conversation was a bittersweet reminder to Sophia of what she had given up, but she couldn't deny the bond that was forming, not just with her child from afar, but with Julian as well. For Julian, these moments were a revelation. He had initially seen Sophia as part of a transaction, someone to fulfill a role in his plan. But now, with each late-night conversation, he began to see her as something much more, a woman of strength, wisdom, and compassion. He admired her ability to guide him so selflessly, even when he knew it must have been tearing her apart. Their struggles were intertwined, yet vastly different. Sophia grappled with the pain of separation, while Julian faced the daunting task of learning to be a father. But through these shared challenges, an unexpected connection began to grow. Julian started to question everything he had thought about their arrangement, about family, and about what, or who, might truly be missing in his life. Could their story really end with a signed piece of paper? Or was this just the beginning of something neither of them had foreseen? Weeks turned into months, and Sophia tried to move forward. The money Julian had paid her allowed her to rent a small studio apartment and enroll in art classes. But every time she walked past a baby store or heard a child's laughter, she felt a pang in her chest. Meanwhile, Julian was thriving as a father, but something still felt incomplete. He couldn't stop thinking about Sophia, her resilience, her warmth, and the connection they had shared during the pregnancy. Against his better judgment, he decided to visit her unannounced. "Julian," she said, surprised to see him at her door. "What are you doing here?" Julian hesitated, unsure of how to explain what he was feeling. "I think I made a mistake," he finally said. Sophia invited Julian in, and the two talked late into the night. Julian admitted that while he loved his son deeply, he couldn't shake the feeling that Sophia was meant to be part of their lives. "You're the only person who understands this journey," he told her. Sophia, though touched, was hesitant. "Julian, our arrangement was clear. I gave up my rights," she reminded him. But Julian wasn't asking her to take on the role of a mother overnight. "I just want you to be there, for him, and maybe for me too," he said, his voice filled with vulnerability. "Have you ever been given a second chance at something you thought was over?" Over the next few weeks, Sophia began spending time with Julian and the baby, whom he had named Noah. At first, it was just casual visits, an afternoon at the park or dinner at Julian's home. But as she watched Noah grow and saw how Julian had transformed into a devoted father, she felt her walls begin to crumble. Julian, too, found himself drawn to Sophia in ways he hadn't expected. She wasn't just the woman who had carried his child. She was someone who inspired him to be better. Still, doubt lingered. Could two people from such different worlds really build a life together? One evening, while Sophia was feeding Noah, Julian blurted out, "Stay!" She looked up confused. "Stay here, with us," he clarified. Sophia was stunned. "Julian, this isn't what we agreed on," she said. But Julian was insistent. "Agreements can change. People can change. I don't want Noah to grow up without you in his life. And honestly, I don't want to either." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she wrestled with the weight of his words. Could she take the risk of stepping into a role she had walked away from, or would she lose the chance to build something beautiful? After a sleepless night of soul-searching, Sophia made her decision. She called Julian the next morning and said, "I'll stay, but only if we do this together, as equals." Julian agreed without hesitation, promising that their relationship would be built on mutual respect and partnership. Slowly, Sophia began to integrate into their lives, not just as someone who cared for Noah, but as someone Julian relied on. The two began to see each other not as business partners in an unconventional deal, but as two people who had found something rare, a second chance at family. Their journey wasn't without challenges. Julian's high-profile lifestyle often clashed with Sophia's desire for simplicity. And there were critics, business associates who questioned his decisions, friends who didn't understand their unconventional relationship. But for every obstacle, there was a moment of triumph. Noah's first steps, family dinners filled with laughter, and quiet nights where Julian and Sophia would talk about their dreams for the future. Slowly but surely, they built a life together, one filled with love, trust, and hope. A year after Noah's birth, Julian proposed. It wasn't a grand gesture at a gala or a lavish event. Instead, it was a quiet moment at home, with Noah playing on the floor. "I never thought I'd find someone who truly understands me," Julian said, holding Sophia's hand. "But you've shown me what love can look like when it's built on trust and resilience. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Sophia's face as she said yes. In that moment, all the pain and uncertainty of their past faded away, replaced by the promise of a bright future. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, a celebration of love, family, and second chances. As Julian watched Sophia walk down the aisle, holding Noah in her arms, he felt a sense of completeness he had never known. This wasn't the life he had envisioned when he first approached her under that bridge, but it was a life richer and more fulfilling than he ever could have imagined. Sometimes, the most unexpected paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. What do you think? Can love and family truly overcome the odds when given the chance? Thank you for joining us for this incredible story of resilience, love, and redemption. Remember, life's twists and turns often lead us to the most unexpected and rewarding places. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of hope and inspiration. We'll see you in the next one.